Executive Director over at the Omran Centre for Strategic Studies, to discuss how effective these sanctions could be. Joins us now from Istanbul. Ammar, good to have you on the show. Is it wishful thinking to assume that these sanctions, known as the Caesar Act, will be successful in getting the Assad regime to change the way that it operates?
Well, it certainly will increase the cost of non-cooperation by the regime and its supporters. And I think it's mainly directed at third parties that have been supporting the regime. This is the time that the military campaign has slowed down, not ended yet. And this measure seeks to end the military aspect. And next is the economic recovery. And that's where economic warfare has begun, obviously, a while back. This is not the first sanctions, but this is by far the most unprecedented and strongest sanctions ever imposed on the regime. And so whether it changes the behavior or not, I mean, historically, sanctions do not necessarily change alone, at least, or single-handedly, do not change regimes. Nevertheless, they do not change behavior very often without other diplomatic measures. So obviously, this is one of the many tools that are needed to safeguard Syrian lives, and it's called Syrian Civilian Protection Act. And it has a lot of obvious negative repercussions that Syrians and international community has to work on covering these humanitarian needs. And obviously it's exempt, but there are many restrictions and many hurdles that international organizations have to go through to get international aid. But I mean, the main point here is that the Caesar, the defected soldier, have smuggled these 55,000. This is the main concern. The main concern is that we have huge numbers of tortured victims, of forced disappearances, of forced displacements. That has to end, and to increase the cost of the continuation of the current regime. I mean, this is unfortunately the last tool that the international community has tried or attempted to enforce.
You talk about the international community. There needs to be sort of a collective effort, and these sanctions under the Caesar Act aren't only imposed on Syria, or more specifically the Assad regime, but also on any party, any company, any institution, an individual, including countries. How much damage do you think that these sanctions will have on them?
I think it will have a lot of damage. I mean, especially with the decrease of revenues to Russian oil revenues, to Iranian also revenues. This at least aims to put economic pressure and damage on anyone who deals with the Assad regime, anyone who supports this corrupt regime that has it is the primary cause of death and destruction and humanitarian loss in Syria. So, I mean, yes, this is a single-handedly U.S. sanctions. These are U.S. sanctions and not necessarily international community, because the international community has failed to intervene to save the lives of Syrians.
All right, Ammar Kahf, thank you very much for joining us here on Home Studio on TRT World. I do appreciate your analysis.